Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and today I have a flip video featuring the Spellbinders August 2024 club kits, and as per usual I will be making at least one flat, one layered, one interactive, and one pop-up card. Here's a quick look at the 4 cards that I'll be making in this video, and because my flip videos do tend to be a little bit on the long side, I like to show these up front and also to timestamp this video, so if there's one card in particular you want to see me make, you can just hover over the timeline and skip straight to just that card. So the club kits that I'll be featuring on these cards are the Better Press Club, the 3D embossing folder, the clear stamp and die of the month, the small die of the month, the large die of the month, and the stencil of the month. I also do get the glimmer of the month and the wax seal of the month, but I don't have the wax seal yet, and so those two will be featured in upcoming videos. So without further ado, let's make these. Okay, so we will start off with the flat card. My flat card today will feature the Better Press Club, and this one's pretty fun. I really like the sort of artsy, organic feel of this one. It's just a lot of splats. And it's pretty cool. Now technically it is a registration Better Press, but I'm just going to ignore that because they're splats. You can do whatever you want with them. You can put them wherever you like. Certainly, if you wanted to recreate exactly that pattern that you see on the packaging, there is a printed acetate that shows you exactly where and how to position each of these individual splatters to recreate that exact design. But I feel like part of the fun of this set is that you can use these however you'd like. So what I thought I would do is just make my own little design. And being that this is my flat card, I basically want to do everything onto this panel, which is 100% cotton panel. I use Crane's Electra just because it's a little bit more affordable and I can buy a lot of it and then experiment. And if something goes wrong, I won't feel bad if I have to throw away a panel or two. And so I started with the largest splat just so that I have an anchor for my card for the design that I'm creating. And I wanted to I had in mind very loosely what I wanted to do. I wanted to try to be minimal. I wanted to make the design asymmetric, so I'm pushing everything into this lower corner here. But then things went a little bit off. So I decided, well, just one splat. I'm still struggling with clean and simple, leaving a lot of white space, and I did not feel comfortable with just the one splat. So I thought, well, let me add 2 splats, and I'll put one of the splats in teal topaz, which is the same color as what I have already down. And then I thought I will bring in some pink. And my boo-boo is that you have to kind of remember everything's kind of mirrored in reverse when you see it on your Better Press versus when it gets transferred onto your card, because I didn't want to put the pink off in that corner. I wanted the pink next to the teal topaz so that I had pink in the middle of two splats of teal topaz. And so now my design looks weird in my mind to my eyes. And so I thought I need more splatters and I need them in pink. So that's when I decided to pull out 2 more splats in smaller sizes, and I added those to the opposite side. And now I have the nice rule of 3. So there's 3 very strong pink splats. Now, the fun of these splatters is that they're fun, they're great on their own individually, but look at what happens when you start to overlap them. When that teal topaz overlaps with the taffy, these are Better Press inks that I'm using, it creates this really lovely purple. And I think that's something fun that you can play with when you're positioning your splats so that when they overlap, maybe you'll come up with some new fun colors. Now, because this is my flat card, and my definition of a flat card isn't that it's a single layer, just your card base. It's one layer on top of the card base, and any accents or embellishments need to be flat. So nothing too two-dimensional. So to stick to that and still have a nice border, a nice matte layer behind this, what I did was I just took that same taffy ink pad and I swiped it along all four edges of my card base, and I trimmed down my cotton card panel so that it's 4 inches wide by 5 1/4 tall, and that way I have a really nice border all the way around, and it almost looks intentional that I kind of had to wing it with those additional pink splatters. So I just went with it. All right, so now onto my layered card, and my layered card is going to be a Z-fold card. I already have a 3D embossed panel here. I'll show you how to make that when I do my pop-up card, because it's actually leftover from my pop-up card. And for my flip videos, I always present them in this order: flat, layered, interactive, then pop-up. But I think I can safely say it's never the order I actually create the cards in, because usually it's the pop-up card or the interactive card that I'm most jazzed about, because those usually come to mind first in terms of when I'm sitting down to think about what I might like to showcase in my flip video. And so those are the ones that I usually tackle first, and more often than not, it's actually the pop-up card that's very first. And so that's why I'll show you how to make this 3D embossed panel during that section. This panel was leftover, so I thought, well, I may as well use it. It's here. So I'm gonna use that. But firstly, I need some other elements for my Z-fold card. So I've got the large die of the month here, and I die cut some of the flowers and leaves and stems from plain old white cardstock. I'm using the waffle flower grip mat, and that way my die cuts will stay still as I stencil over them to add some color. Now, the grip mat, it has acetate on both sides of the top and the bottom, and if I'd wanted, I could have peeled the acetate off of the bottom and have it actually stick to my glass mat too. That way it's not sliding around on my glass mat. But I wasn't too worried about that. I was more worried about the die cuts actually staying still as I stencil. And so, and it works great. It's really good for this. And especially since some of the stems I'm gonna stencil, they're really small. They're really thin and delicate, but the grip mat did a really good job of holding them in place. Now, what I like about using stencil or just a stencil brush to ink up white die cuts is that it's fast. So if I were to, say, take an alcohol marker to color this, it would probably take me a long time. If I cut it out of solid color cardstock, everything would be really flat. I wouldn't have any shadows, I wouldn't have any highlights, and I feel like, especially with florals and things in nature, sometimes it's kind of nice to have that color variation. It's kind of nice. I'm not going for anything super realistic, but I just wanted a little something so that it feels a little bit more organic and less flat. Especially since that that 3D embossed background has so much dimension to it. I mean, the 3D just really, really great. You can see a lot of why this is fabulous as a 3D folder in the shading around the petals. You can really kind of appreciate how there's some dimension there, because you can see the color, the inking also sort of fade out a little bit too. So it's really, really fun. Now the big flower, actually several of the flowers in the large die of the month, they're actually layered. Multiple die cuts that you can layer up to create your flower. Now, I've got all of my elements inked up. Everything's ready to assemble. Now, my card base, Zevo cards are so easy to make. Whatever size card you want, just make your card base as usual. Then, on the front of your card, from the back of it, just score and fold in half. And then bring the outer edge of that front panel and fold that back to the folded edge of your card base. And that's what creates your Z fold card. Then I've got this extra bit of cardstock here. It's leftover pink cardstock from when I embossed those panels. And so what I did was I took the same color that I used to add color to my embossed panel, swiped it over the pink cardstock that I had left over to give me this solid strip here. Now you might see there's a little bit of white from my card base showing. I just didn't want to cut into a new sheet of cardstock. So I decided to just work with it. I knew I wanted to do this. I knew I had swiped out and made that solid panel and gave it enough time to dry. I knew there would be about 1/8 of an inch of white still showing. And that's why I decided to make my flower mostly white. It has a hint of pink, very light pink, but it's mostly white because I'm basically using white almost like it's an accent color, because everything else on this card is all colored in. The 3D panel was pink cardstock that's been inked with a darker pink in the negative space. And I've got that strip of the colored cardstock that I made from that same ink onto that same light pink cardstock. And so the white, really ends up being an accent color here. So I kind of went with that. I mean, it was sort of I don't have enough here and I don't want to cut into a fresh sheet of cardstock. And so, I just ran with it. And that's a lot of how I approach my card making. I just kind of just run with it wherever the card takes me. I have a loose idea of what I want to do. For example, this card, I knew I wanted to do a Z fold card. And then everything else just is dictated as I find, the one design element that I like. I try to glue that down so that decision is set, and then I can just continue to work on the rest. And that's kind of how I approach building up this little floral spray here. Is I knew that some of these leaves are just going to have to hang off the edge, but I don't want them to hang off the bottom edge because I want for this card to still be able to stand so that you can display it, because that's one of the nice things about a Z-fold card. It stands very nicely, and so it can be put on display. So that almost dictated, that first set of leaves. And as with anything with florals, feel free to just snip into these if they're not the right size. So I snipped away a few leaves here and there just so that I don't have a lot of overlapping leaves. And that way it looks cleaner too, and everything fits a little bit nicer. I put a little bit of 3D glue gel under my flower, but just in the center so that the petals are still lifted. I actually took a pencil bone folder and curved up those flower petals a little bit. And then, again, just for another splash of white, because we've got white as our accent color, I added a sprig of the baby's breath. And so now I need to add a sentiment. So I decided to, I inked up the rest of that leftover pink cardstock that I have. And I am going to use that as a bit of a sentiment strip. Now, the large die of the month it's got so many flowers. I used the biggest flower in there, but there's like 3 or 4 other ones, including this small one that I die cut out of white. And that's going to help me, have a little bit of an accent for my sentiment. So I pulled out the small die of the month, and that's where I'll be grabbing the sentiment from. I pulled out the word thanks. I actually die cut that 3 times and glued them together to add some dimension, have some thickness there. And then I've had a leftover baby's breath spray, and so I figure I may as well use that. So as I'm figuring out how all of these pieces come together, you're gonna see me do a lot of opening and closing of the Z-fold card. So one of the things that I was trying to keep in mind is that I really want this card to look good when it's closed and you're just pulling it out of the envelope. And so I want for the word and anything that I'm gluing onto this embossed panel, because that's technically the inside of the card, but because we've made a Z-fold card, half of that's going to be visible even when the card is closed. So I want it to still look good when the card is closed. And so I want the word thanks to be hidden. So that's why I keep opening and closing the card, so that I can make sure that the word thanks continues to be hidden when it's closed, but also that this baby's breath spray, that it looks like it's actually part of the little floral spray that we created that's on the front or on that left edge of the Z-fold. So when it's closed, it just looks like it's part of it, and then when you open it, that baby's breath then becomes part of the second composition, which is the inside of the card. And I want that to look nice too. I want that to also be balanced and have our sentiment. And so that's why I wanted to add the extra little flower and everything kind of, still looks good even if you're just looking at the inside. And so that's why all the opening, all the closing of the card. And then of course this stands and displays really nicely too. Okay, so that's my layered card. Now onto my interactive card. Now with my interactive card, I am using the stencil of the month. There's actually 5 individual stencils that can be layered. Now, originally I was thinking I was only going to use 2 of them, but I did end up using all 5. I just don't show all 5. And I am trying out for the first time the Blending Buddy from Trinity Stamps. I have Carrie Rhodes and Tunisia at Trinity Stamps to thank for this, because I was on a live stream with Carrie and I had mentioned that I don't know how we got on the topic of talking about blending brushes and which ones were good and which ones folks had tried before, and I guess I made the statement that I kind of feel like they're almost all the same. And Carrie said, "Lynn, have you ever tried the Blending Buddy? Because not all blending brushes are the same." And I was like, "No, never tried it. Happy to be wrong though." So she's like, "Once you try it, you'll understand." And so I was like, "Oh, okay, well, I'll pick some up and I'll give them a try." And the next thing I know, a set of 3 show up at my house because Carrie mentioned to Tunisia at Trinity Stamps that she would really like me to have these to try. And so, so they sent me some. It's so sweet of them. So thank you so much to Carrie and to Tunisia. I'm gonna work with them more. In fact, I actually blended, I stenciled more than what you see me doing here on camera because I thought that I would just use the flowers. And in the set of 5 stencils, 2 of them layer up for your flowers. And then 2 out of the 5 will layer for the leaves and the stems. And then 1 of them actually gives you some fine line detailing for both the flowers and all the greens and the stems. So off camera, I did the leaves and the stems, and for that I did use the blending buddy because those were larger areas. A lot of the detailing for the flowers, those are such small openings that I found it a little bit easier to use the smaller brush for that. Now, my card today is a mini slimline infinity shaker. I happen to have this infinity shaker acetate sheet. This happens to be from Cat Scrappiness. And these are really fun. I mean, of course you can make these yourself, but it's already cut to size. They've already got, the double-sided adhesive on all of the glue tabs. They've mitered the corners. It's all done and it's all really great. I mean, it's thicker acetate than I would generally use, but that's all the better because it makes your card feel even more substantial. So with the infinity shaker pouch here, it's really easy. If you're using a pre-made one, they've already scored the glue tabs for you and they've mitered the corners. So all you need to do is just adhere the left bottom and right edge. Leave the top open so that you can fill it with your shaker mix. And I'm just making a little custom mix out of some different sequins that I have. But you can use whatever you'd like. And it's nice because you can kind of preview things and then just dump them right back out again if you don't like where it's headed. So that's one thing that I really like about making these infinity shakers. And plus, they're just really easy to do. Now, if you were gonna do this yourself, because you didn't have a pre-made one, all you would need to do is cut a sheet of acetate that is 1 inch wider and 1 inch taller than your panel. So this is mini slimline and it's 3.5 by 6. So you would want to make or cut a sheet of acetate that is 4.5 by 7, and along each edge score at 1/2 inch. And that will get you 1/2 inch glue tabs all the way around. And you can score, fold, and just do that same miter cut where you cut off a corner in each of the 4 corners, and that way you don't have overlapping acetate when you fold your corners in, and it's as easy as that. So my interactive card this month is super easy. Infinity shakers are really fun, really easy to make. And of course, I thought about Carrie as I was blending, and she is the queen of shaker cards. She even runs a Facebook group that's all about shaker cards. So I'll leave a link to Carrie's group in the description box below if you want to see even more shaker card inspiration. Now onto my last card. This is my pop-up card, and as promised, here's how I made that 3D embossed panel. So what I'm doing is inking onto the side that has the like the printed Spellbinders. So I'm inking onto the back of that, and kind of the way that you know what is going to be inked or how this will look is if you feel your embossing folder, because some companies print, I mean, every company does their embossing folders a little bit differently. So if you just feel which side of the folder, which side is raised, that's what's going to touch your ink. And anything that's sort of indented, that's going to be whatever your native cardstock is. So here I'm going to emboss onto a light pink cardstock. And so I've chosen a darker pink to fill in the negative space. So here you can see it's the space in between the flowers, in between the leaves. That's the negative space. And now with that first panel, what I did was I was kind of in automatic mode and I wasn't really thinking about what I was doing. And I sprayed my cardstock panel. You didn't see me do it on camera because I just spritzed it right before I ran it through the embossing folder. I sprayed it with water on both sides because I'm using a slightly thicker cardstock and I was worried it might crack. But here's what happens when you do that. So on the left side, that's the panel that I spritz water front and back. And on the right side, I spritz only on the back, not on the front. The front side, the side that's touching the ink, that was dry. And so you get two very different looks. One is very soft because it's, it had water already on the card panel. So when the ink touched it, it sort of spread a little bit and it created a softer look. And then on the side where I kept everything nice and dry, on the top, on the front, the side that was going to touch the inked side of the embossing folder, that's much more crisp. And that's the look I like. I prefer that. But both look very nice. So it kind of depends on what you're going for. The reason to spritz your card with water when you're embossing though is because, especially if you're using a thicker cardstock, the 3D embossing folders, they add so much dimension to your card panel. And so all of that manipulation of the card panel, it actually might crack your cardstock. And so if you spritz it with water though, it's going to moisten the paper fibers, and instead of just cracking, they'll just mold. They'll just shape, they'll take the shape of the embossed panel a little bit better. So that's why to do it, but you don't necessarily have to spritz on both sides. And in particular, if you're going for a nice sharp image like this, then you want to leave the dry side, which is the one that's going to touch the ink. So I've got a little bit of pattern paper. This is actually from Not Too Shabby, and I wasn't sure how much pattern paper I wanted to use versus how much of the embossed panel I wanted to use. But in the end, I went with minimal for both, actually. Now, my pop-up card is going to be a shutter card. And so to create the shutters, I have that same light pink cardstock. I'm cutting it to 3.5 wide by 2 3/4 tall. 3.5 wide by 2 3/4 tall. Along the 3.5 inch edge, I'm going to score it at 1/2 inch. That's going to be a 1/2 inch glue tab. And I'll go ahead and miter my glue tab. So I'm just going to trim a little triangle off of these corners. You don't want to cut past your score line though. So just from your score line to the outer edge, just take off a little triangle. That way when this folds down, if it's not folded exactly right, those glue tabs will still be well hidden. My scoreboard actually has an envelope maker, which helps me to cut 45-degree angles. So for the shutter, I need to cut these banner, fishtail ends. And all I'm doing is lining up the corner, this is on the opposite end to our glue tab. So the glue tab has already been mitered. And on the opposite end, I just take my panel here. I lined up the corner on my cutting track and held it against my envelope maker, which gives me a 45-degree cut. And I'm just eyeballing. I'm just estimating how far to cut where it's roughly in the middle. And then when I make my second cut, I can kind of estimate where that's going to meet up with the other line, and then trim it close enough, and then I can just use my little scissors to snip off the other end so that it meets up in the center there. You could, if you wanted, you can measure the center and then cut exactly to the center, but just estimate, try to fall short of center on your first cut, and then on your second cut, you can probably eyeball it to get pretty darn close. And then just take your scissors and snip it the rest of the way. Now, these two shutter pieces, they're gonna get glued to the flaps of our gatefold. If you've never made a gatefold, this is an A2 size card. So I start off the same with a piece of cardstock that measures 8.5 wide by 5.5 tall, and then I score 2 1/8 along the 8.5 inch edge. I score 2 1/8 from both sides. So normally what you would do for a regular folded card is you would score your 8.5 inch edge in half, but we're not going to do that. We're going to basically split the width of the card, which would normally be 4 1/4. You split that in half, and that gives you 2 1/8. So that's how I arrived at those measurements. And then when you fold those two flaps, they will meet up in the center and form a gatefold card. So now I'm going to do a little bit of dry fitting to position these shutters. And what I want to do is position this so that this is the most wide the shutters will be. And then I traced that opening onto some white cardstock so that I can stamp out the hidden message that gets revealed when you open this card and the shutter opens. And so that pencil line will sort of be a nice indicator so that I know like where I can stamp my sentiment. And I'm going to bring in my clear stamp of the month. And this is a really, really lovely stamp set. It's got this really beautiful, I think they're magnolia, or maybe they're cherry blossoms, because it's called Colorful Expressions Blossom. So maybe it's cherry blossom. I think that's what it is. And it's got some small sentiments as well as some large words. And so you can kind of mix and match and combine the large words with the smaller sub-sentiments. I've got, now the sentiment I'm using is a combination of two. There's thanks for all you do. And then that won't fit as it's designed onto this little diamond here. So what I did was I did a partial inking of for all you do. That's the longest part. And I stamped that in the center where it's the widest. And then I did a partial inking of just the word thanks and stamped that above. And what I wanted to do was add something else to kind of fill out this diamond a little bit more. And so I took a second stamp from the cent that says my friend, so that the complete sentiment reads, thanks for all you do, my friend. So this is a really versatile stamp set. It's great that you can kind of combine it to create these phrases, longer phrases if you'd like. The other sentiments that you have are in the small sub-sentiments, on your special day, on your birthday, from all of us, just wanted to say, and just a note. And then the larger words or sentiments you can see there, one is hello, and then the second one is for you. So really, really fabulous. Okay, so now I think we have just about all of the elements ready to assemble. So I've got my card panel here. This is cut to about 4 1/8 by 5.5, and the reason it's 4 1/8, even though the card is 4 1/4, is because that panel has to sit between two score lines, two folds. So it needs to be smaller to accommodate space for that folded cardstock. Otherwise, it's not going to fold down flatly. Now with my shutters, I'm going to position this so that the edge of my shutter, where that glue tab is, it's right up next to the fold line of one of the gates, but it doesn't cross over that fold line. And it doesn't even cross over, that bit of cardstock that you see where the scoring is. So that's why you can kind of see a little bit of white when I open this up. I'm going to attach the second one too, making sure that that they line up with each other, that they are kind of parallel to each other. And then I've got my sentiment that I stamped out here, so I'll position this as well. And most of this is going to get hidden, but I'm going to still trim this down so that I don't have quite as large of a white panel here. So I gave myself some pencil marks just to trim this down to what will definitely be covered by the shutter. But the reality is more. There's gonna be another panel that goes over top of the shutter that's gonna really cover up a lot more of the pattern paper. Ultimately, at the end of the day, very little of the pattern paper is showing, but it is nice to have some extra color back there, some extra, texture. So I'm glad that it's there. It's just that you don't have to worry too much about picking like the absolute best pattern paper. In fact, don't pick something that you love and that you want to actually be seen, because so much of this gets covered up. So I've got some of that very same pink cardstock that is the same color as my shutter. And so now what I need to do is cut a panel that is going to have our aperture opening for our shutter. Now, I just chose this circle because you need to make sure that the circle is not too small to where you're not going to be able to see the opening that your shutter, the widest opening that your shutter can open to. So you want it to be larger than that, but you don't want it to be so large that it shows too much of your shutter mechanism. So what this ended up being is the circle that I used in diameter, it measures 2¼ inches in diameter. So that's the size circle that I used. And the panel that I cut, it actually ends up being, well, I kind of trimmed this a little bit to fit, but it ends up being 3¼ and I took a sliver off of it just because it'll make everything fold a little bit nicer, but also because my paper trimmer left a lot of fuzzies and I didn't like that, and I didn't want to sand it down. I figure, well, it's better just to trim off those fuzzies anyways. It'll be cleaner and it'll also make it easier to fold this down. Now, I have to figure out where to die cut this circle because I need a circle cut out of this strip of cardstock that I have here. So I basically positioned this strip on top of my shutter and I lined up my circle die so that it's going to be exactly where it needs to be. And I'll run that through my die cutting machine so that I have an aperture opening through this panel here. Now this panel, the height of it is 6½ inches, so it's 1 inch taller than my card base, and I'm eventually going to score a 1/2 inch glue tab on the top and on the bottom. So when I was positioning it, I just positioned it with the top score tab or glue tab in place, and that way I can make sure that it's lined up exactly where I need it to be so that I have an opening here. And of course I'm going to dry fit everything, so this is just temporary tape. And here's where I realized, oh no, I can't close this whole thing down. And the reason is because this panel is too wide. You need to allow for the glue tabs of the shutter pieces, the fishtail banner end, those pieces, the glue tabs on those are each 1/2 inch wide. And so our card is 4 1/4 wide total. And so this panel, the largest it can be is 3 1/4, because 3 1/4 plus our 2 1/2 inch glue tabs takes up the full 4 1/4 width of the card. So if you're adapting this to make, to another size card, for example, that's how you figure out how wide this panel can be at most. It can be thinner than that if you want, but maybe in this case I could have gone a little thinner, then I could see a little bit more of the pattern paper, but I still wanted a solid border around that circle aperture, so I didn't want to go too much thinner than what I already have here. So with that positioned, the reason why I didn't score my final glue tab on the bottom initially is because without it scored, I still have some flexibility of moving this a little bit up, a little bit down. I could still adjust it a little bit. But it turned out everything is good to go, and so I went ahead and scored it. I mitered off those corners of the glue tab, and as I was looking at it, I kind of felt a little bit plain. So, if you're gonna do anything to this panel, it's better to do it before you've glued this into your card. And so, what I decided to do sort of last minute is I decided to take this really lovely stamp, and I want to stamp the cherry blossoms, but I didn't want the border because this has this really nice arch, and it really is very lovely. It frames the cherry blossoms so beautifully, but I didn't want any of that border. I just wanted the cherry blossoms as a bit of a floral accent in on the corner of this panel here. So I decided originally I wanted to use that same ink pad, that Brilliance ink pad that I used on my 3D embossed panel, so that I can bring some of that same coloring onto the inside of my card, especially since I used that ink for the small sentiment, "Thanks for all you do." And so I thought that it would look good bringing that forward too. But the challenge is that the Brilliance ink pad is a large ink pad, and I didn't think that I would really be able to ink up this stamp to avoid that arch that I don't want to stamp off. And so I decided to pull out some of my Dewdrop inks, and I found a color in Versamagic. Pink Petunia is what I ended up going with. And because the Dewdrop inks have they've got that rounded edge on one side, but then they've got the pointy edge on the other. And so with the pointy edge, I can really kind of get it to go very precisely only to the flowers, and I can safely avoid the border of the stamp design. For just a brief second, I thought about also stamping out a little bit of the florals in the upper opposite corner, but I decided against it. I'm really happy that I did, because instead I decided to actually stamp out the large word hello. And because I went with a lighter color for the florals, the hello sentiment was an opportunity for me to bring out the darker Brilliance ink pad and still be able to bring forward, some of that darker pink. And that worked out really well. So this is another kind of, example of how I just sort of let my cards organically kind of, come to me. I have an idea. Sometimes it plays out well, sometimes it doesn't work out so well, but it might lead me to other ideas. And so that's how this one came to be. And to attach this, all you need to do is just glue that glue tab on the top and the bottom. You want to keep this nice and centered, and make sure that your aperture opening frames up the shutter and it frames that sentiment that gets revealed. And then you just need to glue the bottom glue tab. So that's the inside all done. Now for the outside. So with the gatefold, what I did was I had the 3D embossed panel. I trimmed that down to 4 inches wide by 5 1/4 tall, and I just cut it in half. So now each strip is 2 inches wide by 5 1/4 tall. And I am going to glue these. Now I'm gluing them flush to that inside edge so that when they meet up, it's seamless, as if it's one petal, or one panel, I should say. And if you can see, the card has a natural tendency to kind of stay open. So with gatefolds, often you'll want a belly band to keep it closed. So I've just got this is a slightly lighter weight cardstock. It's 65 pound, and I'm just doing a soft wrap around the entire card. I like to do this last so that I can really fit it to the card, because this ends up being kind of bulky. We got a lot of layers here. We've got, everything going on the inside with the shutter mechanism. You've got the 3D embossed panel that has all of that lovely dimension. And so custom fitting the belly band to this will help to kind of make it easier to pull the belly band on and off, because when it's too tightly fitted, it can be hard. It can be a struggle. And so that's why I like to keep a very loose fitting. And I took a couple of circle dies to cut out some of the pink cardstock that I have left over, and this is just a way to bring the inside of the card, because the inside has that circle aperture, so I wanted to bring some of that to the outside of the card as a little bit of a preview, a little bit of a sneaky peek of what they're going to get when they open the card. And so I took the same Brilliance ink pad and I inked around the larger of the two circles so that I have a matte layer. And then what I'm going to do is, again, pull out some of the sentiments from the small die of the month. And I decided to go with Hugs Enclosed. I thought that was a really fun one. And what I did was, same thing that you saw me do earlier. I actually did it first on this card. And then I kind of used the same trick on my interactive card, but basically I just swipe out some of that Brilliance ink and make my own custom solid color cardstock. And so the reason why I'm swiping this onto the pink cardstock as opposed to, say, like white cardstock is because even though this is a pigment ink and it sits on top of your cardstock, it's still going to look like a little bit different depending on, the color cardstock that you swipe onto. And so because I wanted everything to really match with that embossed panel, that's why I keep swiping onto the pink so that it's as close of a match as possible. And then I've got the smaller of the two circle die cuts, and I took that same Versa Magic in Pink Petunia. I inked up that same clear stamp of the month, and this circle actually happens to fit like perfectly inside the arch. So I didn't have to worry about if I inked up a little bit of the arch, it wasn't that big a deal because it wasn't going to hit the cardstock anyways. And so here again, I'm bringing a little bit of what's on the inside of the card to the outside of the card so that you kind of have some continuity and a little bit of a preview of the inside from the outside, and everything kind of matches. And so I decided to do that same kind of monochromatic stamping on that. Now, to make the sentiment nice and legible against that background, I have die cut the word out of white, and I die cut the shadow or the bubble layer out of that same dark custom cardstock. So really, really fun. Very easy. I mean, this card did take, my pop-up card usually always takes the longest. And so you'll often find that it's actually a pretty good representation of my of my flip videos too. It's usually half or more than half of the length of my flip video, and that's generally the case in real time also. It generally takes me probably as long to make the other 3 cards as it does to make the pop-up card. But all of these little details, I really feel like they make a card, and for things like a pop-up card and an interactive card, you're already making something very special. And so taking a little bit of extra time to do these small details, I think really help to make the card shine. So the last thing I need to do is, you may have noticed when I wrapped my belly band, I glued everything and I left the seam right in the front, knowing that I would have this circle covering up the seam. So now my belly band's gonna look really seamless. On the back, there's no seam at all, and on the front, we've covered up the seam with this large circle. So that is my last card, and here's a final close-up look at all 4 cards. My flat card features the Better Press Club, which is this really fun set of splatters that you can better press, as well as 4 sentiment plates that you have. So really, really fun. Very, very cool set. You get a lot of different splats, a lot of different sizes and shapes. So really, really love that. Next up is my layered card, which is a Z-fold card featuring the large die of the month is where these florals come from. I just die cut them out of white, and then I used a brush to just kind of brush some ink onto them. And the sentiment thanks comes from the small die of the month, and this is the extra 3D embossed panel from the 3D embossing folder of the month. Love that panel. It's just so gorgeous and really, really lovely. So love that card. It might be my favorite, but the pop-up card actually could also be my favorite. Let me know if you have a favorite in this series. This one is my interactive card, which is an Infinity Shaker card featuring the stencil of the month as the panel on the back and the small die of the month for the sentiment hugs. And then last but not least is my pop-up card, which is a gatefold shutter card. So here you see my gatefold, which features the clear stamp of the month for that cherry blossom stamp design. Hugs Enclosed is from the small die of the month, and this gorgeous embossing is from the 3D embossing folder. So pretty. I love all of that dimension, and I love this faux letterpress technique where you can ink up your folder before you run it through and get this really lovely look. Then when you open, you have this hidden sentiment that gets revealed, which is from the clear stamp of the month. And that floral stamping is that same cherry blossom stamp. And I did use a bit of pattern paper. That's from the Not Too Shabby shop. So those are the 4 cards that I made today. Really, really fun. I love this pop-up card. It's a really fun mechanism on the inside and has a really nice reveal. Thanks for checking out my video today. I'll leave links to everything in the description box below. If you have a favorite card among the 4, let me know which one it is in the comments. Thanks again, and until next time, happy crafting and have a fabulous day. Bye.